Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It is my pleasure today to welcome to Abney our city's safety recovery czar, the former chief of department of the NYPD, Terence Monahan. First, let me say, I think the fact that the mayor created this position is really significant. It recognizes an essential fact, which is our city does not come back, does not recover if people do not get on the subways, and which really means unless they feel safe and that they are safe. This position is significant, and so the person the mayor selected for this role. So as most of you on our Zoom know, Chief Monahan recently retired as chief of department after a decorated 40-year career with the PD. As senior advisor for recovery safety planning, he is now working hard across sectors, across public, private, not-for-profit sectors, so people can cooperate on public safety. His background and accomplishments reflect somebody who understands policing and public safety from really every single level of the NYPD. He started as a patrolman in the 41st Precinct in the Bronx and rose through the ranks. He was executive officer at the 3-4 Precinct in Upper Manhattan. He served as CO of the 3-4, the 4-6, and the 4-8 precincts, and he was appointed chief of department in 2018. As a leader in the NYPD, Chief Monahan was a major proponent of community policing, a program started way back by the late, great Mayor David Dinkins, a beloved member of our Abney community. Chief Monahan continues to take an impressive, tailored approach to public safety, addressing specific issues in different areas with unique strategies that are really sensitive to the community, their businesses, their residents, and all the pieces that go about making the community or a community vibrant. That speaks to the type of public service he's been. We're thrilled he has this position, and we're thrilled to have him with us here today. Chief,
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be here today. Here at the group of diehard New Yorkers. Well, that's what I am. Born and raised in the Bronx, if you can tell by my accent. Listen, I took this role in the end of March just for the idea is we need to get this city back on its feet. This has been one of the toughest years I've ever experienced in law enforcement and just in the city. To see Times Square completely empty for months and months on end was something that we know we had to do, but we need to recover now. And to recover, business has to be strong. People have to be able to do business in this city. And to do that, you need public safety. People have to feel safe coming back to New York, coming back to the office, taking the trains, tourists from around the country need to have that level of safety. And I can talk about the realities of crime in this city. I can spit numbers at you all the time, say, oh, it's safe, look at this number, look at that number. None of that matters if the perception of crime is that this city isn't safe. So that's what I have to deal with, working with every city agency and not just the police department. How do we create an air of public safety? How do we make people feel safe? Not just be safe, but feel safe coming back to New York City, coming back to do business. I'll start with the subways because that's the lifeblood. You know, we all know if you're coming back to work, we need people riding those subway trains each and every day coming in. If you pick up the news on any given day, you're going to see some story of some crime that took place on a subway. Well, it's New York City. There's going to be crime. You know, the day we can completely eliminate every crime in New York, then we'd be in utopia. But the crime isn't as bad, but the perception is, and we need to deal with that. We need to understand what the perception is and what people need to feel safe. So working with Kathy O'Reilly and Rodney Harrison over in the PD, they have committed an additional 1,117 police officers per day into the subway system. These are cops that you're going to see at the turnstiles. These are cops that you're going to see riding the train. 500 of them are committed to riding trains during the rush hours. It's going to be cops that you see walking on the platforms to make you feel safe. You know, you're dealing with an average in transit of 30 crimes a week, 30 major crimes. Well, we're putting 1,117 additional police officers into that system so people feel safe. So that when you get on that train somewhere in Brooklyn to come into Manhattan to go to work, The hope is you're going to see a cop as you get into the system. You're going to see a cop somewhere on that train, and then you'll see another cop as you leave. This is going to continue. This isn't a quick stopgate. This is a commitment that the PD has made in the recovery process to make sure people feel safe. One of the main gateways to come into the city is Penn Station. Anyone who's been around Penn Station in the recent past will tell you, a lot of issues there, a lot of concerns, a lot of quality of life type things. The PD had originally had 2 to 4 cops working there a day. They have increased that up to 48 police officers per day working within the Penn Station area, dealing with all the different issues that are there and making people feel safe. Let them see that blue uniform as they're walking through. But that's not it. This isn't all just about the PD. We know that there is some serious homeless issues in and around Penn Station. So I have a commitment from Steve Banks over in DHS. They have taken over from the MTA the services provided to the homeless within the Penn Station area. They have committed 51 BRC, that's the Bowery Residence Committee members, to work within the Penn Station area, walking around, engaging people in there who may be homeless. That's in addition to 18 DHS workers. So they are going to be committed to working underground, dealing with the people, dealing with the issues, dealing with the homeless there, trying to get them out of a subway system and into a bed somewhere. They have, I believe it's 45 beds right now committed solely to people from Penn Station who they can get to take these services. But this isn't just about taking them, pushing them out of Penn Station and putting them on the streets outside. We're working with Breaking Grounds on the top end. They have committed resources outside of Penn Station to deal with any homeless that now leave the station that are trying to now sleep on the streets there. Again, we want to get them into services. We want to get them off the streets, get them into a better situation. When you look through Manhattan, there's been a lot of different quality of life issues. We created an 80-person team under the leadership of Deputy Inspector Steve Hellman. Steve Hellman is a longtime commanding officer in Manhattan South. He knows the neighborhoods well. He is now leading this business recovery team, we're calling it. Their job is to work on the issues that are presented specifically in Manhattan right now through any quality of life, any issues that may arise. They are going to work hand in hand with homeless services. They're going to work hand in hand with the Deputy Commissioner of Worker Protection, new Sandra Bellis, who's taken over that role. Fantastic, a great partner for us and very willing to do the work. And that's dealing with the street vending. There is street vending all over our streets, a lot of illegal vending, a lot of counterfeit goods. This is something that DCWP couldn't handle on their own. They were being intimidated when their workers went out on the street trying to even just educate vendors on what they can do and what they can't do. So now the NYPD is committed with Steve's guys in Manhattan to go hand in hand with DCWP to deal with the issues that are out there to make the streets safer. I know there was a major concern over at Herald Square recently, a lot of ongoing conditions. We were able to go in there with DCWP, with Steve Hellman's team, clean it up, and Manhattan South kept a couple of foot posts out there to keep the issues from returning. And this is what we're doing. So whenever an issue comes up, and I'm listening to businesses all through the city, I've sat down, excuse me, I've sat down with a lot of different businesses, and what is your specific concern? Whether it's a homeless person who is taking up an entire street corner with their stuff, well, we're going to send homeless services out there with PD. If we can't get them to get into services, if they can't move their stuff, well, then we're going to have to take their stuff. Whether it's valuable, we'll voucher it. If it's garbage, we'll have sanitation pick it up. But you also can't have someone taking up an entire city block with their garbage. So it's something that has to be dealt with. This is the sort of things that we need to make sure New York is ready for business and ready to reopen. But this isn't just about Manhattan. This is about the entire city. This is about making sure that city services are being done the way they should be done throughout the city to keep people safe. One of the things I initiated was I'm having meetings with all 76 bids. And we broke those bids up the same way that the city's broken up into police boroughs. We have 3 in Manhattan, 1 in the Bronx, 2 in Queens, 2 in Brooklyn, and 1 in Staten Island. Each one of these bids, we have a separate meeting with. So there's no more than 11 bids on any one of our calls. And in this meeting, I have every city agency that has any responsibility for public safety on the call. And we go through whatever the issues are, whether it's sanitation, illegal dumping, whether it's Department of Health issues, when it comes to food vending, or whether it comes to the idea of someone with a mental health problem in the area that needs services. We have DOMNH going out there and hitting them with their heat teams to try and connect them. Those are a service provider along with a clinician, a social worker and a clinician going together to deal with them, to see what the issues are and to get them the help that they need. Police department, of course, is on this call. Department of Buildings, Department of Transportation, and whatever the issue is, we're going to deal with it. And you know, for 3.5 years as chief of department, I ran CompStat, and part of CompStat is getting accountability from the people who work for me. You know, when you hear an issue, I don't want to hear someone saying it's not my job. Someone else is going to take care of it. Nah, that doesn't work. We have to go out and we have to be able to make sure that we work together as a team. You go to one city agency, if they can't handle it, they now have a team that they can reach to make sure someone there can work and do it. And whether 2, 3, 4 agencies need to organize and go together to deal with that problem, that's what we're going to do. My office is organizing these complaints. We're following up on them. We're making sure that something happens, and we're making sure that the person who makes this complaint is getting some sort of resolution and is being told what happened. Not every issue can be fixed. We know that. But I want you to be able to have that conversation, know if it can't be fixed, why, and what we're trying to do to get it fixed. This is how, once we get city agencies coordinated, working together, making sure that businesses can survive and will continue to survive in the city. You know, you look at the counts, we were talking about this before, how people are starting to come back out to the city. You're starting to see a flood of people coming back into New York, which is absolutely fantastic. Times Square the other day had over 200,000 people back on its streets as its pedestrian count. The subway system had 2.3 million people on its system per day, still short of where we were pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, Times Square was doing close to 400,000. The subway was doing 5.5 million, but it's on its way back. It's not the numbers that we were seeing pre-pandemic, but they're getting there. And as this summer comes, a lot of things are being planned during the summer. A lot of things are starting to open up. I've been speaking to a lot of businesses, talking about what they need to reopen, to get their employees back. Many of them are talking about coming back somewhat in the summer and full in the fall. So I've been talking specifically to these businesses, and I've been speaking to their employees. Because again, dealing with that perception of crime. You know, there's a lot of people sitting at home saying, I don't want to come back to the city. I read in the paper that it's not safe. Well, I want to be able to talk about what we're doing specifically to the people that have this fear and allay these fears. New York City is not 1980s, 70s New York. Absolutely not. This city has had some issues. There are some crime problems. Nothing near where we were. And there are so many safeguards in place that is never going to allow this city to go back. CompStat, where they deal with issues each and every day in the police department. And I tell you what, I'm going to make sure that I'm getting every city agency on board to make sure whatever the problems are, we are dealing with them, and we will work closely with anyone in this city who wants to come back here, bring the tourists back, get them back in the hotels. In September, when we see Broadway reopening, you know, we're going to get a lot of people coming back into New York. And I want the idea of anyone who misses coming to New York this summer, this fall, saying, damn, I really missed something good. I should have been there. And that's what this whole initiative is. That's what my role is. You know, we'll see where it takes us, but I got a great feeling. I got a great feeling that you're going to see a lot of activity and a lot of good things happen in New York. We all survived a tough year. New Yorkers are tougher than anybody. We've lived through 9/11. We lived through Sandy. This is nothing. We can get through this, and New York is going to be booming real soon. Steve, I'll leave it to you for whatever questions you want to throw my way.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. First, thank you for all you're doing, and thanks for taking the time today. I'll start with a question about guns, and you talk about the message to the world. Obviously, there's been an increase in shootings, and obviously that gets a fair amount of media attention. Can you talk a bit about how you guys are taking on that increased threat?
Listen, this is the biggest problem. And this is, when you talk about crime increases, this is the one that is the most problematic. And this is the one that you can really look at and say, you know, it doesn't matter, pandemic, non-pandemic, is the amount of increase that we had. First, just the numbers that we are, it brings us back not to the 90s, but to 2010. That's where we are. We had gone down to under 800 shootings a year in New York City. You know, a city of 8.6 million people, under 800 shootings was absolutely remarkable. Last year, it shot up to 1,500. And it's something that every one of us in the police department just were quite upset. A lot of things happened during the summer last year. Obviously, we all know after George Floyd, a lot of reforms, a lot of changes in the police department, one of which was getting rid of the anti-crime units in the beginning of the summer. Probably a mistake that we didn't have a replacement in mind to figure out what to do once those units were gone. By the end of the summer, came up with public safety officers, which was a uniformed version of the anti-crime. A lot safer for the cops going out there, and it was able to alleviate some of the issues we were having with whether or not they were going to get involved. The people understood they were cops when they jumped out of the car. Once we did that, a lot of gun arrests were being made, and those gun arrests continue right now. Issues that have happened, and these are things caused somewhat by the pandemic. Courts are not functioning at the rate that they used to be. And you look at bail reform and just kind of think how this compares together. You're trying to get people out of jail with bail reform, least restrictive bail. So you lock somebody up, he's getting out of the system if he can because the least restrictive bail. Courts are not operating at 100%. Courts are going to focus on those that are currently held in bail, rightly so. So if you're in jail, the most priority is going to be to someone that's already held in jail, not a priority case, someone that's outside of jail. Those cases have been lingering for a long time. So you've seen individuals locked up with multiple guns that have been able to get out under the least restrictive bails. Those cases have not been able to move forward because the court system wasn't operating the way it was. Currently, it's starting to come back. Courts are opening up more. A lot of these old cases that have lingered for a long time can now go to the courts, and now you can get some sort of consequence for those actions. That is going to help a lot. For the police department, this is what CompStat's about. CompStat sits and talks about violence all the time. We talk about what's going on, what resources have to be put into those areas, who are the drivers of those violence. The drivers come, it's a lot of the cruising gangs associated in the Bronx and Brooklyn. That's where the majority of this violence is taking place. It is retaliatory shootings from one gang to another. Part of what we're doing is building cases against those that are the most violent. Once we build these cases, again, they take a long time to build, and the courts did not have the grand juries for us to present them to. They are now open again, and these cases are being presented at this point. There was a takedown of a real bad crew in Brooklyn just a couple of weeks ago, and more of them are going to be rolling along as the summer comes on. We keep putting out the NYPD. I keep saying wait. The NYPD keeps putting out additional resources, and the summer is going to be no different. You know, guys whose job is normally to work behind a desk administratively, well, we'll push that paperwork off to the fall, and a lot more resources are coming out onto the streets. Luckily, and this is a big thing, you all know we had our head count cut by around 1,100 last year. 2 classes were canceled because of the pandemic, so we really didn't get any recruits coming for a long time. During the course of the year, there was a lot of retirements. We lost a lot of police officers to retirement, but I can say that's going to abate right now. Because last June, because of everything going on, cops made a lot of overtime. If they were thinking about retiring with over 20 years, they left by last week. Otherwise, that overtime wouldn't have figured into their retirement money. We finally were able to get our first class, graduated from the academy, 850 police officers that came out 2 weeks ago. Another class is coming out in June. It's around 600 police officers. In August, another class will be coming out of 500 police officers. We just put a class in of 600 that'll come out in October, and they're currently working of a class of, I think, 700 to 800 to go in July. So we're going to get the fresh bodies. Something that was desperately needed, new bodies, new recruits coming out onto the streets, being put into the areas around the city where this violence is taking place.
I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question. I'm going to throw it to Larry Scott Blackman for a question. When you say the PD took down a crew, can I just ask you to explain to us a little bit more what that means? Is that like how big is a crew? How long? Do they go to jail for a while? Do they have the same problems as like what you talked about the criminal justice system in terms of courts not operating?
No, once we take, these are cases that we work hand in hand with the district attorney's office. So this was a case in Brooklyn. It involved the murder of the 1-year-old out in Brooklyn. This was a crew member that was involved in that. He was a gang member. What we were able to do is we put together a whole history, going through videos, going through ballistic matches from different cases, going from stuff that we may seize on private messages, on Instagrams, on Facebook chats, dealing with sometimes just the rap videos that they go talking about one another. Obviously, we always want to get a cooperator, and we normally do get a cooperator in there that can tell us what the violence is about. And now we are indicting them pre-arrest on multiple counts of violence. So we can identify someone who has fired shots at someone else, who may have shot somebody, may have been associated with a homicide. They're going to get charged with those specific crimes, in addition to the conspiracy of acting as part of a gang in furtherance of these crimes. So every crime, and there are multiple acts that these individuals are involved in. I believe this was 17 separate individuals. Each one of them are involved in multiple different acts of violence. So this is all shooting at somebody, possession of guns, homicides, and non-fatal shootings. We tie them all together and we make a long presentation to the district attorney's office, to a grand jury. The grand jury will vote on them. They are indicted. These individuals in these cases are held in on high bail. Generally speaking, they're going to get multiple years. The guys involved in homicides will disappear for a long time. Some of them in some of the low-level conspiracies may get 2 to 3 years in. But these are people specifically involved in the violence, and it really makes a difference. So you take them off that street, and other kids who may be thinking of joining this crew say, wow, Johnny, who was supposedly invincible, is now going away to 10 years in prison. I don't want to get into that world. So these cases are very important. And afterwards, what the PD will do is they'll go into that neighborhood and they'll explain what they did. and send that word out. Hey, this is what's going to happen if you're going to be involved in this ongoing violence back and forth. So these cases are really important. There's a lot of them going on throughout the city. They may take 6 months to a year to be able to build that case and then make a presentation to a grand jury. But once they do come down, you're taking the worst of the worst off the street.
Thank you. All right, we've got a question from Larry Scott Blackman. Larry?
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Chief Monahan, for being here. Thank you for your optimism as it relates to the return of New York City to a better place. I am going to ask you that as you take down your crews and you look at rap videos, please avoid videos of mine from 30 years ago, as well as those of my father, who has made some pretty raunchy videos in his day. We are not at all involved in anything illegal. My question, though, in all seriousness, is related to exactly what the police department is enforcing these days. I've had some interesting conversations with some precinct commanders on the local level, and I just wanted to get a sense from you as you focus on making New York City better. Some of the activities that take place on a local level relate to quality of life issues, and those can sometimes serve as gateways to larger problems. So as stewards of the business community and the neighborhoods in which we live, just give us a sense of exactly what the police department is focusing on as it relates to quality of life and above. Thank you.
Quality of life is vital for us to do enforcement. Obviously, a lot of laws have changed, so there are things that we can no longer arrest people for. Obviously, smoking marijuana. Right now, you can walk on the streets anywhere. You can smoke a cigarette. You can smoke a marijuana cigarette. That's the law, and that's just the way it is. But other quality of life issues, we have to enforce. And though we were supposedly taken out, we now have to assist other agencies in doing that work. So homeless issues, we had a homeless outreach unit, NYPD was taken out of that. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be involved in it. We are working hand in hand with DHS because they can't do it alone. They need the support of the NYPD. Illegal peddling, major quality of life issue. We had it, probably the one I'm hearing the most when I go around talking to all the different business improvement districts. We can't ignore it. DCWP was given the lead. They cannot do the job alone. So this is part of what my message is, and I'm talking to all the commanders. I talk to Harrison and Juanita Holmes all the time. We have to be involved in that quality of life. These are the main issues that we're hearing from every business that I speak to, every real estate owner I speak to. This is what they need to make sure that, one, they can rent their new stores. They don't need a homeless guy with all his property laid up in front of that store so they can't rent it. A business that is selling merchandise doesn't need some illegal vendor standing right in front of his store selling the same merchandise. These are issues that we can and will work with the other agencies to enforce. We're documenting them, and that's part of me and my follow-up to make sure that something gets done. Regular quality of life, drinking in the streets, parties, we have to still enforce it. It is now a civil penalty as opposed to a criminal, but that doesn't mean you can do it in the streets. This is where violence comes from. A lot of times, these large parties that grow on the streets, alcohol flowing all over the place, one thing leads to another, a crap game taking place, a gun's going to come out, and someone's going to get shot. This is something that the PD every single day looks at. It's something that comes up at ComStat. And I tell you, it's one thing where the body cams are great because we'll get incidences where there'd be a call for some quality of life, gambling on the streets, drinking on the streets. A car would handle it. They would leave, and an hour later, someone would get shot over there. Well, what we do is we go back and take a look at the body cam to see if these cops handled that situation correctly, to make sure. This is the check. You know, if you don't do your job right, look what can happen. You didn't do your job right here, and someone got shot. So quality of life, 100%, we have to be involved, and I am going to be pushing them every day to make sure that these issues get addressed.
Thank you. And we miss Harrison at the 3-2. So please send out. The 3-2 was different when Harrison was there. Thank you.
He's got it all now. Rodney's the best. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's great. Thank you.
So Chief, thank you, Larry. Chief, you talked about a general kind of, let's say, more of a front-footed approach to certain kinds of crimes where maybe earlier in the pandemic that wasn't going on. Obviously, I guess I ask, how do you do that in a way that doesn't kind of heighten what have been tensions with communities and in a way that is respectful? Is that a key piece of how the officers are going forward? Because I obviously there's been a lot of attention to the issue and something that's important to everybody.
Listen, and it's coordinated. We can't go out there and enforce everything like stormtroopers. That just causes trouble within the community. And I'm going to tell you, taking a look at something at the start of the pandemic, and this is something that I believe really caused a lot of the issues that we saw. The NYPD was enforcing a lot of the social distancing rules. We were giving summonses for people not wearing masks. We were breaking up people on the streets. We were going into restaurants. We were doing a lot of types of enforcement at the start of that pandemic for 2.5 months, which caused a lot of animosity towards the police. And then George Floyd happens, and I think everything joins into one as the police became the enemy, which is so contrary to what we've been doing. Prior to this, neighborhood policing was our philosophy. This was cops getting to know the people in their community, getting out and talking with the people in the community, getting to know that same neighborhood every single day. If there was an issue, see if there was other ways of handling it besides just enforcement. And when we started neighborhood policing back in 2014, we were able to reduce crime to that 800 number we talked about, while reducing arrests, reducing summonses, and reducing stops. It was the perfect formula for everything. COVID really messed it all up. It really did change how we were policing, and that's what we need to get back to. This isn't about, I need to go into every single neighborhood and write as many summonses, make as many arrests. No, this is creating those connections again, solving the problems any way you can. The people in the neighborhood getting to know who their cops are, because there's an NCO in every single neighborhood, a neighborhood coordination officer. You should know who your neighborhood coordination officer is in your neighborhood. Get to know that cop. He's your connection to the police department. During the last year with COVID and people going out sick, and then the demonstrations where we had to pull cops from everywhere to cover it, we really lost so much of that connection, so much of the great work that was done from 2014 to the start of this pandemic. Well, now it's time to get back to it. It's time to get back to the basics of where we were, recreate these connections that we had. We do build the block meetings, which I think are finally going to go back in person, because doing a Zoom for a cop, getting to know his community really doesn't work. He needs to be able to talk face to face with somebody. Those are starting now again in person. This is your local cop having a meeting with his local community, no bosses involved, cops and the cops that patrol that neighborhood and the communities that live in that neighborhood, all is one. And that's the focus, and that's where the PD is going to start getting back to. Rodney Harrison, who took my job, me and him worked together in the Chief of Patrol's office. He was my XO, and this was what both of us believed in. I've known Rodney for years, and this is something that we both feel very, very strongly at. And Rodney has committed himself to make sure that we can get this agency back to that neighborhood policing philosophy.
And does that extend to sort of in this new push towards going to, you mentioned working with all the bids. Does that include outreach to like businesses and stores and stuff along the way? Or is it more to the businesses and stores come to you with complaints?
Absolutely. Every bid has to get to know their NCOs. And that's one of the things I push at all the meetings. You know, I have the borough executives on the phone who now have to have a relationship with all the bids. You know, I think too often your borough chiefs didn't know who all the bid people were. didn't walk out there and see the conditions that were out there. You know, the NCOs would go and do it, but without the support from the rest of the borough, I don't know if they had the leverage that they needed. I know I walked Fordham Road the other day, and 326 vendors on Fordham Road. I now have Brendan Timoney, who's the XO. He walked it. He couldn't believe it either. Now those NCOs have the backing of the borough to do what they can to help that neighborhood kind of take some of it back. So the NCOs have to work with the businesses. This is the way we improve, but it has to be more than just the NCO. Businesses, only 76 bids in the city. They need to be connected to the borough directly, and that's what I've established.
And so crime traditionally goes up in the summer, especially right if it's hot outside and people aren't home. And so obviously you have this kind of, we're all sort of like leaving our homes, let's say, or at least kind of moving around more than we have been. And you couple that with a traditional time of the year where crime goes up. I'd say, like, is there are there any special things you guys are doing about that? And is there something about that makes you nervous? Like you mentioned that guns are the top of the list. Is there like a number 2 that gets more pronounced during the summer?
Well, first off, again, the cops that we're adding out on the streets are going to make a difference. Anytime you put more cops out on the street, it helps. We are focused in on the violence. And again, your violence is really targeted to certain neighborhoods. And we have to make sure we have the right amount of personnel in those neighborhoods dealing with those issues, dealing with what the quality of life complaints are, because those things kind of lead to the violence. My number 2 really is that quality of life, because everything else stems off of the quality of life. Crap games, drinking is going to lead to violence. Illegal vending, homelessness on the streets is going to lead to businesses not being able to get the people into their stores. It's going to make tourists feel uncomfortable coming back into Times Square. That area has to look good. It's got to be comfortable. People got to feel a comfort level when they're going in as it gets warm. But I think the other thing is, for the last year, we haven't seen people on the streets, especially in Manhattan. I think as you start to see people on the streets in Manhattan, you're going to see that comfort level go up for people. You know, you're not walking on Times Square by yourself and you see someone who looks problematic and you're nervous. Now you're walking with another 2,000 people in that area and you don't have that same fear level that you may have had. As more and more people come out, I think you're going to have more and more comfort level as you go forward.
Can I ask how the officers are feeling? Obviously, it's been a challenging time for them, and we're asking more of them. And I assume, I assume it's complicated. So
extremely complicated. Now, you have when you pick up a newspaper or you listen to something on TV talking about how bad the police are, how bad you are in your profession, and you may have just spent that day saving someone's life, saving a baby, yet you turn on the news and they're saying, oh, the police are bad because of something that happened out in Minnesota. It does wear on the morale. But I tell you, New York City cops and all cops are unique characters, that they will sit back and they will complain to you. They will say, my morale is horrible. I don't know why I'm not going to do anything out there. And when they're out there and something happens, they run right to the danger. They never hesitate when the stuff happens. They will complain. Cops are the greatest complainers in the world. But when something's going, they jump right at it. And that's why through the last year, you talk about policing throughout the city, negative things on cops. Well, they made more gun collars over the last year than they had since 1995. That's the most dangerous thing that a cop can do. If a cop wasn't willing to take action, you wouldn't see numbers like that. So amazing people. It would be great if they heard a little more support, a little more positivity, you know, a little bit about what a good job they do when they do it. You had the Times Square after the shooting, running into it, grabbing the kid, taking it to the ambulance. This is daily. There's a story each and every day about a cop risking his life to do something, to save somebody. Yet all you hear is defund the cops, take it away from the police. That narrative needs to change. I think it's starting to change. I'm starting to hear more and more, you know, electeds and everything talking about the need for policing, that you can never defund the police completely. Can you reform? Absolutely. Do things need to get better? Absolutely. But this has to be a joint effort. This can't just be a one-way conversation at the police. You need to sit down with the police and say, hey, what do we need to do to improve? And when we can get people who want to do that, I think things will be better. But cops, they're always going to do their job. They are amazing people. You don't take this job just for the money. You have to really want to do this. And listen, I did it for 39 years. And even as chief of department, I was still running in there, getting involved. And it's something that I think every cop does.
Thank you. So let me ask you one final question. What can we do? What can our community do? And obviously you said one thing, show a bit more just daily support vocally to the officers. What are other things we can do to help make this successful? Because we're all really invested in the city returning, for everybody.
Well, for everyone who's got employees, get them back to the office. Enough Zoom. It's time for us to come back and sit in an office and actually talk to one another. I really don't think this is a great way of living, talking on a computer. You know, so many small businesses here in New York depend on people coming back to the office. Restaurants depend on businesses coming back to the office. Do what you need to do to encourage people to come back. Come back in, talk to one another. You know, you're missing the by the way here by not being in the office. That's when that guy walks past you in the office. You go, by the way, I meant to talk to you about this. You know, we need that. You need the personal interactions. You need to be able to talk to someone, look them in the eye, have a conversation. That, I think, is the biggest thing that business can do, and talk positively about New York. You know, you may read bad stuff, but when your friend is sitting at home afraid to come in New York, tell them about, I was in New York every day. It's fine. People are coming back on the streets. Talk about your experience on the subway if it's a good one. I saw a cop on the subway today. You know, they told me there's 1,100 additional police officers every day on the subway. Don't be afraid because you read an article in the newspaper. This is what I need. And then just in general, let us know the complaints. Let us know the conditions that need to be addressed to make your people comfortable, to make your business be able to succeed. And that's what my role is. And I'll get the agencies out there to do that work.
Thank you. So let me close with two things. First, we take it seriously about getting back in person. We hope we're going to see everybody on June 17th in Chinatown for our first in-person event. Come eat with us and spend some money in the neighborhood and see each other. And then we're going to get going on in-person events again soon. But let me say, if we don't say thank you enough, Chief, I really want to say thank you to you. You are a heroic figure to a lot of people and for a really good reason. And the essential trust that you help uphold to protect people, we would not really exist as a city without that. And so we're grateful for all your service and we're grateful for what you're going to do in the future.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate it.
All right. We appreciate it. We'll see everybody again soon.
All right, take care. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Chief.